Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Benji Haya, and in this bulletin we'll get you a roundup of the stories developing around the world. First up, the headlines. Joe Biden's Build Back Better Act faces its biggest hurdle today. The House of Representatives will vote on the act devoted to infrastructure, climate change and social programs. Beijing is forced to shut roads and playgrounds amid heavy smog due to pollution as China ramps up coal production. Russia is set for another grim record of daily coronavirus deaths, with nearly 1,200 COVID deaths reported in the last 24 hours alone. The Delta variant surge shows no sign of abating in the country. In one of the most aggressive steps towards vaccination, Joe Biden's administration sets a January 4th deadline for enforcing strict rules intended to push tens of millions of American workers into getting their COVID-19 shots. For the first time ever, the Pope appoints a woman to the number 2 position in the governorship of the Vatican City, making her the highest-ranking woman in the world's smallest state. And Swedish pop sensation ABBA make a comeback with their new album Voyage, nearly 40 years after they split up. We begin this bulletin with a focus on a key test facing US President Joe Biden. In just a few hours, the US House of Representatives will vote on some of the major bills that form the backbone of his Build Back Better agenda. They include a social spending plan, a climate change bill and a bipartisan infrastructure bill. Now, the climate change bill promises an allocation of a whopping $555 billion to fight global warming, guaranteeing incentives and credits for Americans who opt for renewable and low-emission energy sources, such as buying electric vehicles and the installation of solar panels. It also plans to cut greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2030. Two of the main areas covered under the social spending bill are childcare and housing. The bill allocates $400 billion for free and universal preschool, and it plans to limit childcare costs and extend child tax credits. $150 billion is set to be allocated to build 1 million housing units. The plan there guaranteeing help with rental and down payments, and a $1 trillion infrastructure plan, which has already been approved by the Senate, will be debated too. Democrats have missed previous self-imposed deadlines to vote on the legislation. Indeed, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi expressed her unease at the fact that Congress has twice failed in recent weeks to pass the infrastructure bill. She's determined that both bills could move together quickly. The Democrats are also reeling from a disappointing defeat in Virginia, where they lost the governor's mansion to the Republican candidate. The party is therefore eager to show that it can move forward on the president's agenda and fend off Republicans in the 2022 midterm elections, when control of the House and Senate will be on the line. We'll get you the latest updates from Capitol Hill as we get them.
Japan and the United States are two strong democracies in the region.
Moving on. As China continues to ramp up military pressure on Taiwan, Western allies are joining hands to counter Beijing in the Indo-Pacific. In a historic visit to Taiwan, European Union legislators have voiced support for the island nation and called for bolder actions to strengthen EU-Taiwan ties. The 7-member European delegation met the Taiwanese president and assured Taipei that it's not alone.
This visit showed how important the Taiwanese democracy is for the European citizens that we are representing, And we came here with a very simple, very clear message. You are not alone. Europe is standing with you, by you, in the defense of freedom and the defense of rule of law and human dignity.
The three-day visit includes exchanges with Taiwanese officials on threats such as disinformation and cyber attacks. It comes amid concerns in the bloc over alleged attempts by China to influence European politics and sow misinformation about the COVID-19 pandemic. Last month, the European Parliament, adopted a non-binding resolution to deepen ties with Taiwan. Taiwan's intel chief warned the country's foreign ministry of China's expansion in the Pratas Island in the South China Sea. General Ming of Taiwan's National Security Bureau told the government that Beijing could use force to reunite the island with mainland China sometime in the future, although he added that the scenario is not likely to happen in the next couple of years. Last week, meanwhile, the Taiwanese president confirmed presence of US troops on the island. A small number of US forces held military training with Taiwanese soldiers. Beijing hit back at the United States over a report on China's expansion of its nuclear arsenal. China called the US report full of prejudice and accused Washington of overhyping the threat. The Pentagon claims that China's growing its nuclear weapons much more quickly than it had anticipated, narrowing the gap with the United States. The US report warns that China could have 700 deliverable nuclear warheads by 2027.
The report released by the US Department of Defense, like previous similar reports, ignores facts and is full of prejudice. The US uses the report to hype up talk of the China nuclear threat. This is pure trickery through manipulation of words and confusing sights and sounds. And the international community knows this well. In fact, the United States is the world's largest source of nuclear threat.
Britain has become the first country in the world to approve a COVID-19 antiviral pill. The potentially game-changing molnupiravir pill has been developed by US-based Merck and Ridgeback Biotherapeutics in a boost to fight the pandemic. Britain's health regulatory agency recommended the drug for use in people with mild to moderate COVID-19 symptoms, and with at least a risk factor for developing severe illness.
The United Kingdom has become the first country in the world to approve the much-heralded COVID pill developed by pharmaceutical giant Merck. The oral antiviral drug made headlines last month when testing data suggested that it could lower the chance of being hospitalized or dying from COVID by half for the people most at risk from the disease if it's administered early on in the illness, within 5 days of symptoms appearing. The pill was developed jointly by Merck and a company called Ridgeback Biotherapeutics and is one of several pills being developed by the pharmaceutical industry to treat the virus. Oral treatments are seen as a potential major weapon in the fight against the disease. Last week, the company also reached a deal with a United Nations initiative which will allow the pill to be manufactured as a generic version for developing countries.
Let's stay with coronavirus because whilst countries scramble to avoid another deadly winter wave of the virus, the number of COVID cases in Europe is once again on the rise. The World Health Organization has issued a dire projection for the region. Its emergencies director, Michael Ryan, urges caution.
We only have to look at the roller coaster epidemiologic curve to know that when you're coming down the mountain, you're usually about to go back up another one. And the fact that Europe is climbing that mountain again should really stand everybody up around the world and say, what are we going to do? Because Europe does have the capacity, and European countries have the capacity. They have the vaccine access. They have the money. They have the systems in place that they can react. Many other regions don't necessarily have those capacities in place. So I think it's a warning shot for the world to see what's happening in Europe despite the availability of vaccination.
The World Health Organization's Europe chief also expressed concern over the rising pace of infections in Europe. Hans Kluge told a news conference that we are once again at the epicentre. He fears that the current trajectory would mean another 500,000 COVID-19 deaths by February. Now, last week, Europe and Central Asia saw a 6% and 12% increase, respectively, with nearly 1.8 million new cases and 24,000 new deaths reported. The previous week, Europe and Central Asia accounted for 59% of all cases globally and just short of half of all reported deaths. And over the past 4 weeks, Europe has seen a greater than 55% increase in COVID-19 cases. Cumulatively, there are now more reported cases in the European region than in Southeast Asia, the Eastern Mediterranean and the Western Pacific and Africa combined. Based on the World Health Organization's latest Europe data, hospitalization admission rates due to COVID-19 more than doubled in just 1 week. The health body has blamed soaring cases on a combination of insufficient vaccination rates and a relaxation of preventative measures like mask wearing and physical distancing. For the first time, Pope Francis has named a woman to the number 2 position in the governorship of the Vatican City. With the appointment, 52-year-old Italian nun Raffaella Pedrini has become the highest-ranking woman in the world's smallest state. Her new position will be that of Secretary General of the Governorate of the State of Vatican City. The role is traditionally held by a bishop. The position is comparable to being a deputy governor of a state or deputy mayor of a city, for example. The governorate oversees more than 2,000 employees and the daily workings of the Vatican City. Pedrini will be responsible for overseeing administrative operations, including the Vatican museums, post office and police. The development comes as the Pope forges ahead with a mission to achieve greater gender equality in the Church. The Pope promised to improve gender balance many years ago, but the women's groups in the region say that the promises were too slow in being realised. Pope Francis maintains there is no reason why a woman should not hold a top post. However, the empowerment doesn't apply to posts open only to ordained priests, and this means for women at the Vatican the extent of achievements is nonetheless restricted. Compared with previous pontiffs, Pope Francis has given more empowerment to women in the male-dominated Holy City. A number of other women already hold a number of top posts in Vatican departments, but they deal with religious and social issues and have much smaller staff levels. Earlier in January, the Pope changed the law to allow women to serve as readers at liturgies, altar services and distributors of communion. In February, he broke with Catholic tradition to appoint a woman as Under-Secretary of the Synod of Bishops, and also in February, he appointed Italian magistrate Katia Samaria as the first woman promoter of justice in the Vatican's Court of Appeals. Then in August, he named Italian nun Alessandra Smerelli to the interim position of Secretary of the Vatican's Development Office. The department there deals with justice and peace issues. 6 women have also been appointed to senior roles in the council that oversees Vatican finances, and he's appointed women to the posts of Deputy Foreign Minister, Director of the Vatican Museums, and Deputy Head of the Vatican Press Office. Next today, in an attempt to block migrants from entering, Lithuania has built the first stretches of a steel wall with razor wires on its border with neighbouring Belarus. The European Union has accused Belarus of deliberately encouraging migrants to enter EU states of Poland, Lithuania and Latvia, but Belarus has repeatedly denied the accusations. Its President Lukashenko has said that his country will no longer stop migrants since EU sanctions drain resources.
Lithuania has built the first stretches of a steel wall on its border with Belarus since migrants from the Middle East and other areas began entering from Belarus this year. The European Union accuses Belarus of deliberately encouraging the migrants to enter EU states Poland, Lithuania and Latvia via Belarusian territory, as a way of putting pressure on the bloc. Belarus has repeatedly denied this, but its president, Alexander Lukashenko, has said his country would no longer stop the migrants since EU sanctions drain resources. All 3 EU countries have put stretches of razor wire on the border to stop the migrants. Last week, Lithuania began putting up the first stretches of the 11-foot-high steel fence, topped with razor wire. Virgilius Raugale is a border guard commander.
It's probably impossible to build a totally impassable obstacle, so I think this barrier too could be overcome. But that would take a long time and we would be able to react.
Lithuania wants to build 300 miles of the wall by September next year, supplemented by coiled razor wire and video surveillance. In August, Lithuania started sending almost all entering migrants back to Belarus. More than 5,600 migrants have been prevented from entering since then, the border guard said. Poland's defence ministry, meanwhile, said on Thursday Belarusian soldiers had threatened to open fire on Polish troops just across the border, in what it called an attempt to escalate a crisis over migrants along their common frontier.
Elsewhere, since Lake Fagubin in northern Mali dried up, communities on its parched shores have had to defend their homes from encroaching sand dunes whilst finding new ways to scratch a living from the degraded soil. It sparked an exodus of locals and clashes for control of scarce resources, as this report shows.
This was once one of the largest lakes in West Africa, Lake Fagubin. But since it has completely dried up, communities in northern Mali have had to defend their homes from encroaching sand dunes and find new ways to scratch a living from the degrading soil. More than 200,000 people have had to abandon their traditional livelihoods since the river started to disappear following catastrophic droughts in the 1970s. Abdul Karim Al-Hassan is a farmer turned herder.
All this area was covered by water, then the water receded and trees started to grow around the lake, then the trees started to disappear and people grew crops where the trees used to be. During the first rebellion, displaced persons arrived. They destroyed the forest, and once the forest was gone, sand dunes formed.
Other farmers like Mahamadou Osman say tensions are high between livestock herders and other farmers over the little fertile land and water available. He said regular disputes have led to rising levels of crime.
After we've harvested our produce, we have to transport it, and that's dangerous. Even the women you see behind me are at risk. Their maize may be stolen on the way.
Many have left the area due to the lack of economic opportunities in the area. Former farmer Musa Mahamadou Toure said his family survives on what his son sends home from the capital Bamako. The UN climate body said average temperatures in northern Mali are expected to rise up to 4.7 degrees Celsius. That's an increase of over 40 degrees Fahrenheit. There were efforts to boost resilience by restoring Fagubin's wetlands, hoping to make the area the breadbasket of the Timbuktu region. But that has been derailed by waves of conflict, including the most recent Islamic insurgency, according to a 2016 study in the African Journal of Aquatic Science. In the village of Bintagongo, the advancing dunes have buried a schoolyard and cracked the empty building's foundations. Hama Abakrein is the mayor of the village.
This is a school of almost 400 students. That's an entire generation, a lost generation, a generation condemned to flee or being recruited.
And finally, in Paris, before the height of the French Revolution, Marie Antoinette, the country's last queen, was scorned for misrule and particularly disdained for finer tastes, while the rest of the country endured widespread poverty and hunger. To this day, her name gets continually invoked to describe state apathy. Now, one of her prized possessions, a velvet-draped box of diamond bracelets, is going under the hammer.
Diamonds were Marie Antoinette's best friends. It is said that even whilst being imprisoned, she had made arrangements to keep them safe, having to smuggle the letters away to the Austrian ambassador at the time, requesting him to protect her most cherished possession. Wrapped in cotton and stashed away in a wooden chest, her prize bracelets remained unopened for 2 years until Emperor Francis II ordered the chest to be opened. Later, an inventory was made in Brussels and was passed on to Queen Antoinette's heir. 300 years after her death, these priceless jewels represent her penchant for luxury even at the face of certain death.
I think given the rarity of historic jewels, provenance is one of the key points in that collectors are looking for around the world. Whether that's Marie Antoinette, whether that has Indian royal provenance. So it's jewels with provenance, and especially royal provenance, that collectors are looking for, and something that we very, very rarely see, and more importantly can very rarely trace.
The diamond bracelets then shifted hands to the UK's Duke of Windsor, Edward VIII, who gifted it to his wife, Wallis Simpson, the Duchess. Today, an unnamed European family of royal lineage owns the pair of bracelets.
Really, they've never left royal hands. This is a piece of French history that has remained within those families for more than 200 years. And again, that is exceptionally rare to find, and especially jewels of such great quality. You know, if you hold these bracelets in your hand, the quality of the workmanship still today is superior to a lot of the things that we see made in the modern world. So it really is very exciting.
Each bracelet contains 56 diamonds set in triplets. These bracelets are expected to fetch up an estimated $4 million when they go under the hammer in 2 weeks. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Is it better like this?
And that's it from us today on WION's live broadcast from London. For more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION World is One. Have a good day.
There are many other... this is right, Arab.